In 1977, Pontiac launched a white coupe with a shaker scoop, loud stripes, a full-width rear spoiler, and a name that sounded ready for a starting grid. Dealers wanted thousands of them. Buyers finally had a reason to look at the aging LeMans again. Then production stopped after roughly 1,300 cars. For decades, the explanation fit into one sentence. The spoiler mold broke, so Pontiac killed the Can Am. But surviving company records tell a more complicated story. The mold did break. The car did survive that breakdown. What actually killed it was a management decision made after the Can Am had already proved its point. That makes the 1977 Pontiac Can Am more than a rare special edition. It is a case study in how a great idea can become vulnerable when it sits between departments, depends on one outside conversion shop, and threatens a more profitable product inside the same company. To understand why Pontiac needed the Can Am, look at what had happened to the performance image it created in the 1960s. The GTO had once turned the ordinary Le Mans formula into a national obsession. By 1974, the GTO name was gone. Fuel prices, insurance costs, emissions rules, and changing customer priorities had transformed the market. Pontiac still had the Firebird and Trans Am, but its intermediate Le Mans line had lost much of the excitement that once made the division feel young. The basic 1977 Le Mans Sport Coupe was not a bad car. It was simply easy to overlook. Its long colonnade body belonged to a generation introduced for 1973, and a smaller replacement was already approaching for 1978. Pontiac needed something that could wake up the showroom without requiring a completely new vehicle. That challenge suited Jim Wangers. Years earlier, Wangers had helped turn Pontiac performance into theater, using memorable advertising and carefully staged excitement around cars like the GTO. By the middle of the 1970s, he was working through Motortown Corporation, a Detroit area specialty company. Motortown proposed giving the Le Mans the visual confidence Pontiac's regular lineup was missing. The idea did not arrive fully formed. An earlier orange proposal leaned heavily on the look of the GTO Judge, and Pontiac rejected it. The concept was reworked. The new version used cameo white paint, a black lower body, yellow, orange, and red graphics, a Trans Am style shaker scoop, and a large rear spoiler. The Judge name disappeared. The new name was Can Am. Pontiac approved it in late 1976, and the public saw it at the Detroit Auto Show in January 1977. Under the surface, the Can Am was much more than a Decal package. The WW3 option combined hardware from several of Pontiac's strongest identities. 6 V8, rated at 200 net horsepower. Cars intended for California and certain high-altitude markets used Oldsmobile's 403 cubic inch V8 instead. The Pontiac engine was paired with a heavy-duty turbo-hydromatic 3-speed automatic. A manual transmission was not offered. The package also included rally-tuned suspension with front and rear stabilizer bars, power front disc brakes, power steering, 15-inch radial tires, and a blacked-out grille. Inside, Pontiac installed the instrument panel and rally gauges associated with the Grand Prix. That dashboard mattered later, because the Grand Prix was one of Pontiac's most profitable products. Pontiac also gave the 400-powered cars rear axle ratios that made sense for the period. Air-conditioned examples generally used a 3.08 ratio, while cars without air conditioning received a 3.23. The 403 cars used taller gearing. None of this transformed a heavy Le Mans into a quarter-mile champion, but that was not the mission. The Can Am was meant to feel responsive, stable, and special every time its owner walked up to it. That point is easy to miss if the car is judged only by its 200 horsepower rating. By 1977, Detroit advertised net horsepower measured with accessories and exhaust in place, not the more generous gross figures remembered from the muscle years. The Can Am still had torque, a durable automatic, serious tires, anti-roll bars at both ends, and the same basic performance engine identity that made the Trans Am desirable. Its appeal came from the complete experience, not one headline number. Outside, the Can Am looked like the late 1970s answering the GTO era in its own language. The shaker rose through the hood. Tricolor graphics ran across the white body. Black paint visually lowered the car. The rear spoiler pulled the entire shape together. Pontiac's advertising even used the line, "Remember the goat," openly connecting the new coupe to the old GTO nickname. There was a catch. Pontiac could build the mechanical foundation on its own assembly line, but the special appearance work did not fit normal production. Finished white LeMans coupes had to leave Pontiac and travel to Motortown. There, workers cut the shaker opening, installed the scoop and spoiler, added paint and graphics, and completed the Can Am conversion. The cars then returned to Pontiac for distribution. That extra journey was reflected on the window sticker. Period pricing listed the LeMans base at a little more than $4,200. The factory Can Am option added just over $1,200, and Motortown's appearance conversion added another $375. Before ordinary options, the finished car was already approaching $5,800. Pontiac was not selling a bargain bin stripe kit. It was asking customers to pay for a carefully assembled identity. It was a clever, low-volume solution. It was also a fragile supply chain. Every Can Am depended on Motortown's tooling, especially the equipment used to make that unique fiberglass spoiler. There was no second mold waiting in reserve. If that one tool failed, the conversion line could not finish cars exactly as advertised. But before the weak point revealed itself, the Can Am worked. Dealers responded strongly. Contemporary records discussed an initial commitment of 2,000 conversions, while later accounts describe a planned run that grew from 2,500 to 5,000 cars. The precise order totals vary by source, but the direction is not disputed. Demand was much larger than the final production count. This was no small achievement. The Can Am made customers notice a LeMans line that Pontiac was preparing to replace. It gave traditional performance buyers a full-size personality at a time when many Detroit intermediates had become soft, quiet, and anonymous. It also proved that image still mattered. The car was not fast by the standards of the muscle era, but in 1977, a 400 cubic inch Pontiac V8, a shaker scoop, firm suspension, and bold graphics created a persuasive package. The press understood the formula. Writers did not pretend the Can Am had brought 1969 back unchanged. They praised the balance of the package and the fact that Pontiac had made a large intermediate feel purposeful again. Dealers understood it even faster. They were not placing orders because the LeMans platform was new. They were placing orders because Motortown and Pontiac had finally given that familiar platform a story customers wanted to hear. Then the spoiler tooling failed. This is where the familiar story usually ends. The mold broke. Pontiac refused to replace it. The Can Am died. It is clean, memorable, and only partly true. Research published through the Pontiac Oakland Hobby has uncovered internal records that complicate the legend. A Pontiac letter dated March 17th discussed releasing the company from a 2,000 car conversion commitment because of the tool breakdown. That certainly shows the failure was serious. But another internal instruction said that Can Am orders would be processed on a free-flow basis beginning the week of April 11th. A distribution bulletin dated April 26th removed the option from hold status. Known cars also carry scheduled build dates after the original breakdown. In other words, the broken tool interrupted production, but it did not instantly end the Can Am. That distinction changes the whole story. A broken mold is an accident. Canceling a successful car after the interruption is a choice. Why would Pontiac make that choice? The Can Am was caught in a bad position inside the company. It borrowed its instrument panel from the Grand Prix, a highly profitable personal luxury model. Some Pontiac managers believed every set of Grand Prix parts diverted to a Can Am risked displacing a more valuable sale. The special coupe was bringing attention to the LeMans, but it was also competing for internal resources with a car management valued more. Timing worked against it too. Pontiac was preparing an all-new, downsized LeMans for 1978. Extending the Can Am meant investing more effort in a body style that was about to leave production. What looked to enthusiasts like the beginning of a revival could look to a production planner like a short-term complication. The outside conversion process made the argument easier for the skeptics. White LeMans coupes could be built faster than Motortown could convert them. When the tooling interruption created a backlog, incomplete cars represented tied-up money, disrupted schedules, and pressure from dealers waiting for delivery. Replacing the spoiler tool, changing the package, or shipping cars for later dealer installation were all possible responses. But each required Pontiac to keep defending a program some managers had opposed from the start. So the spoiler was not the executioner. It was the opening Pontiac management used to end a car that no longer fit its priorities. Even the final production number carries a little mystery. Pontiac's commonly cited WW3 tally is 1,377 cars. Jim Wangers later remembered 1,133 conversions before cancellation. Registry research generally estimates that most received the Pontiac 400, while only about 42 used the Oldsmobile 403. Because records from Pontiac, Motortown, and later hobby research do not align perfectly, the safest conclusion is simple. Only about 1,300 genuine Can Ams were made. That rarity was not planned. It was created by interruption, internal politics, and a model year deadline. The Can Am's specification tells you why collectors still care. It mixed the LeMans body, Grand Prix dashboard, Trans Am engine identity, shaker scoop, and its own unmistakable graphics into something Pontiac never repeated. It was not a GTO wearing a new badge, and it was not merely a slower Trans Am with a back seat. It was a last experiment in turning an aging intermediate into a performance statement through intelligent parts sharing and fearless presentation. It also arrived just before Pontiac's most visible performance revival. The Trans Am was about to become a cultural phenomenon. The Can Am suggested that the same attitude could have spread beyond the Firebird line. A second generation based on the downsized 1978 LeMans might have been lighter, more efficient, and easier to position. Pontiac never gave the idea that chance. That is the painful part of the story. The Can Am did not fail because buyers rejected it. It did not disappear because its styling was too cautious or because nobody understood the name. It attracted orders, press attention, and showroom traffic. Its fatal weakness was organizational. The car depended on a temporary conversion system, borrowed pieces from a more profitable model, and arrived just as Pontiac was closing the book on its platform. When one tool broke, there was no broad commitment strong enough to protect the program. Today, a genuine Can Am is instantly recognizable, yet many people still have to ask what it is. That question is part of its appeal. The white paint and warm-colored stripes look unmistakably 1970s. The shaker promises more than the horsepower number alone can explain, and the spoiler that dominates the rear view has become the symbol of both the car's identity and the myth of its death. The best version of the story is not that a cheap mold destroyed a great Pontiac. It is that Pontiac had evidence the idea was working, survived the original tooling failure, and still chose not to build a future around it. The mold was repairable. The management decision was final. If you enjoy the forgotten turning points that shaped American car history, subscribe to Classic Cars USA. There are plenty more machines whose disappearance had less to do with the car than with the people deciding its fate. The 1977 Can Am was born from leftover pieces, outside the factory ingenuity, and an old marketing instinct Pontiac had nearly forgotten. For a few months, it made the LeMans exciting again. Then, the division protected its schedules, its profitable Grand Prix, and its next model year. Roughly 1,300 cars remained to prove what might have been. And that is why the Can Am is more than a rare Pontiac. It is the car that survived a broken mold, but not the meeting that came after it.